don't let her speak, don't let her fool you.
I know, I actually, it didn't pop up on my calendar, I don't know why.
That's because the chairman went to the well.
Yeah.
For,
But I
for
got
you.
an email, but it didn't come up on my calendar.
It didn't come up on mine either, but I knew it. I said, is this Gerald? Am I subcommittee?
Here it is.
Yeah.
So we're hearing the bill by Senator Jackson?
Yeah,
Alrighty,
that's why I'm here.
yes.
It's you, I think.
Do you know anybody in Iowa?
No, I don't think you want to know anyone in Iowa either.
Oh, for purpose of indemnification, okay, so we wanna pay the officer that does this, the same thing as we did the day back here. And I don't have, I really don't have a problem with that because officers take their lives for a lot of reasons.
Terrible.
And a lot of risks. Remember Gerald when we did that legislation 2 years ago to give them help?
I'm going to call on Representative Frazier to open the meeting with prayer.
Thank you, Chairman
Oh.
Green.
Wrong one.
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this beautiful day here in Georgia, and we ask that you continue to bless each and every one of us and our families and keep us COVID-free. We ask your continued blessings and support for the many citizens of Ukraine that are enduring this horrible war that they were thrown into. We ask that you keep as many of them safe as possible. And we ask that you continue to bless our chairman to do the will of the people, the work that we do here in the state of Georgia. We ask these blessings in your son, Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Representative Frazier. I appreciate that, and I appreciate very much what you said about the people of the Ukraine. And it's a horrible situation that they're going through. This morning or this afternoon, I'm not even sure where I am right now. Senate Bill 468, Senator Jackson, if you would, are you going to speak from the podium or do you want to speak from the table?
What's the will of the committee?
Either one that you feel comfortable with. Okay?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm here to present Senate Bill 468. I'm working from LC 393203.
Okay, I think all of us have a copy. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for hearing. Just by way of introduction, I should say that while I am a senator, before I was a senator, I served as an EMT for several years. And so I present this bill not just on behalf of people that are serving across Georgia, but on behalf of and because of the colleagues that I've served alongside here in the city of Atlanta. So What this bill does, quite simply, is that it expands the definition of in the line of duty to include any public safety officer, that's law enforcement, EMS, fire, any public safety officer who dies by suicide who's been on duty within the last 30 days. We try to make a really clear and bright line here, so the family would not have to prove that it was because of the job. If a public safety officer dies by suicide within 30 days of working, they would qualify for funds from the indemnification fund. That's what we're trying to do here. Part of the influence of this bill is that the leading cause of death, second only to COVID, is suicide for law enforcement officers, and similarly situated for fire and rescue. And so this is an endemic issue among our public safety officers. Certainly, we hope for an end to that. We want to work from both sides, but in the event that someone does die by suicide, we also want to make sure that their families are taken care of through the indemnification fund.
You know, y'all have before you in the Senate right now the mental health bill.
That's right.
And that is something that is on the minds of all of us as we go forward. And certainly it's been brought to the forefront by COVID. And I appreciate you bringing this particular bill to it. Do we have any opening questions from the committee? All right. Representative Frazier.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Senator Jackson, also for bringing this legislation. I just want to make sure, because I have not read it all the way through, and thank you for clarifying that 30-day period. Mm-hmm. But also in that, as not to have the families have to prove this, is there anything in this bill that states that they should have been in any type of counseling or have on record any type of problems that we might know that would warrant this to happen? Because sometimes, like now in our society, people are taking their lives and nobody even have seen the signs.
That's right.
And so I just want to make sure that the families don't have to prove anything, and it is stated in here. And if you could just tell me where that is.
Sure. So if you, there are no requirements beyond death by suicide, but let's see here. I'll find the line for you. On line 77 through 79, there's a shall here. So the department shall consider the death of a public safety officer caused by suicide to have occurred in the line of duty if the death occurred within 30 days of his or her last day of service. Full stop.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely.
And so who decides this? When you say the word department, is there like a board that determines this
So the
indemnification that we currently have? Is this the same board that will be determining this?
Right, so the DOAS is the department that oversees the indemnification fund. So applications are sent in to them. And again, by streamlining this legislation, so I talked to a number of firefighters. I don't know if you all remember, last year we passed legislation that would say that if you died by heart attack or stroke within 24-hour period of having done strenuous work, then you would qualify. And a number of firefighters have struggled their families have struggled to kind of prove that, to meet that bar.
Right.
And so we wanted to try to make this as clean and easy as possible, so that the department, if the department receives notification that they died by suicide, they would qualify. So the coroner would have to, obviously, or the police, there would have to be some type of report documenting that it was that the death was by suicide, but there would be no other requirements beyond you have to have worked within the last 30 days.
And the reason why I asked you that is because that 30-day period is fine. But what if we had officers that were undergoing psychiatric help and they did it in 32 days? And so, but I'm not trying to confuse your bill. It's just that I want to make sure that they are also compensated.
Right.
But do we have anything in place that say, well, if they are undergoing getting these services and they still contemplated suicide and actually did it, are they eligible for compensation? But that's another bill?
Yeah, I think that's another bill. I will say in our original draft, we had 6 months as the kind of window. And because the indemnification fund was established by constitutional amendment, the people of Georgia voted on this. We wanted to try to walk the line. I didn't want to have to explain to the public that 6 months after serving was still in the line of duty, whereas I feel like we could make a tighter argument for 30 days. But certainly the same question has been brought up multiple times around, well, what if they die on day 31 or day 32? And I just think I think it's a different bill, but it is certainly really important for us to continue to explore.
All right, thank you for bringing this legislation.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Representative Evans.
Thank you, Senator, for bringing this bill, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, so I really do appreciate this, and it's a very sobering situation, and I had the question about the timeline, so I'm supportive of this 30 days, and it's helpful to know that background about how you arrived at that. And then could you just tell us a little bit more about, do you have any statistics for us? I would be interested to know that, about death by suicide by any type of public safety officer.
Sure. So we know that, so we have a fiscal note that's attached to this. And so what was reported to us, and we can acknowledge that perhaps it was underreported, but we know that 5 officers, law enforcement officers, died by suicide last year in 2021. We know from the fire department that there were at least 2 officers who died, or firefighters who died by suicide last year.
You're talking about statewide?
That's right, statewide in
Okay.
Georgia.
We do not have the physical note attached to this. Okay, but we will have it emailed to the members.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry, go ahead.
Right, and so based on those numbers, the Department of Audit and Accounts suggests that this may cost us around $150,000 a year or so, based on those averages. And again, our ultimate goal here is to have 0 deaths by suicide, right? That's our ultimate goal. So this, to me, is kind of a stopgap measure as we continue to push for mental health reform through HB 1013 and other reforms. Yeah. I would like more friends.
Thank you. You want to just walk us briefly through the bill now?
Sure.
Just sort of, if you would, just sort of walk us through each part, and then we'll open it up for questions there.
Sure. So we'll begin. Section 1 is just an opportunity to define certain terms. So the non-routine, stressful, or strenuous physical activity, that applies to the bill that we passed last year relating to heart attacks and strokes. Public safety officer is being defined here clearly. I've had a number of people ask me, are 911 operators included in this? And they are not. The indemnification fund, when it was established a public safety officer to be what is defined here: a law enforcement officer, firefighter, emergency technician, emergency management rescue specialist, state highway patrol, or a prison guard. So that's by Constitution that definition is there. Work-related activity, again, refers to that section of law that we changed last year to include those who die from heart attacks and strokes. If we continue down, line 29, you'll see this is really just some cleanup language that Legislative Council did to make sure that we use consistent language across the entire bill. So there's nothing of substance there. This lays out how much a family could receive. So if a public safety officer were to die in the line of duty, the family receives $35,000 per. Oh, this is disability. Sorry, this is disability, right? And equally monthly installments for 5 years, or they can take a lump sum, and that has a small interest rate penalty attached to it. And then section 2 of that part, this is when they die in the line of duty, and the family would receive $75,000 in equal monthly installments for 5 years, with the lump sum again. So And then Section 3 just outlines who can receive the indemnification funds. So the surviving spouse has to be unmarried, and the surviving children have to be under the age of 19, or they have to be enrolled in college. Again, on lines 48 through 50, that really is just cleanup language. Instead of naming out each individual type of public safety officer, we just say public safety officer. And then we did a little cleanup on line 55. There was a Scribner's error in the original law that left out a word, a very important word, called A. And so they may elect to receive a payment of $150,000 in equal monthly installments for 5 years. We cleaned that up so that it's consistent with what we're actually doing, and that makes a lot of sense. And then we have Section C, or 1C here. This is just about the denial process. We had to edit this because originally, right now, as the law stands, suicide is not covered. And so this just makes it clear about how you could go about a review of denial in the event that there's some type of disability, not including suicide. And then if you go, the actual meat of my bill, so all that had to be done in order just to make things nice and neat. When you get to line 77 through 79, this is what actually takes the action that I'm hoping that we can do, which is that it would consider the death of a public safety officer caused by suicide to have occurred while in the line of duty, if the death occurred within 30 days of his or her last day of duty. So that's the heart of the bill. Of course, we strike the term suicide from the last, if you turn to the last page, page 5, we take suicide out on line 101 because you will be eligible if we pass this law if a family member dies by suicide.
Okay, thank you for walking us through that. Do we have any questions from the committee? Okay. Representative Frazier.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, I just have one question I need clarity on.
Sure.
Under the public safety officer, when you say what are the emergency management guys that's on the side of the road that?
The hero trucks?
Yeah, are they included in here? Is that, which one is? Are they called emergency management specialists?
I believe so, or they're the state highway employees. They'd be covered under one of those two.
Okay, those are heroes and sheroes.
Yes,
Yes.
The thing that's on the truck is hero.
Yeah, it's just a dangerous job.
It is a dangerous job. And yes, they are included as people who are in public safety.
Thank you.
I think those are DOT individuals, aren't they?
I'm not sure, but I know that they are included as state highway employees in this code section. We did get that verified.
All right.
Clarify that they are. I served 12 years on the State Indemnification Commission, and the only thing negative I've got to say about this is it seems like opening the door for 30 days after your last day of duty for a suicide. We spend a lot of money in state indemnification, and it for a while there the rules were very, very strict, and I can recollect an individual who was a fireman who went to fire and actually washed off the truck when he got done, and apparently exerted himself pretty much, drove around the block to dry it instead of drying it with a towel. And I'm sure he exerted himself, but the board voted not to pay his death because he had a heart attack, because they didn't feel like it was in the line of duty, because when they did the autopsy he had some vascular issues onset. And but I'm all for helping people, but I just think suicide for 30 days after his last day of work is kind of expanding it, and that's all I got to say.
Okay. Representative Evans.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, so, Senator, I wanted to confirm when you told us about 5 officers died by suicide in 2021, and then 2 firefighters in 2021. But when I'm looking at your definition of public safety officer, we see, so that number 1 statistic, the 5 officers, because firefighters are included in that public safety officer. So was the 5 officers a law enforcement officer?
The 5, so we don't have really good information on this, but from the Department of Audits and Accounts, the 5 officers were listed on the Blue Help. So this is a organization that follows and takes care of law enforcement officers specifically. And so that's where I got the number for the first 5. I received the number of 2 from the Fallen Firefighters Association.
Right, but so I guess it is possible that there might have been some EMTs or state highway employees or prison guards. That's possible, right?
That is correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for bringing this bill. I do have a question. I tend to lean toward Colonel Hitchens' sentiments as well. But do we have any statistics that show over a 5-year period in our state how many this would have affected, like going back 5 years? Are there any hard facts that show that there were X number of firemen and X number of policemen that these families would have benefited from? Are they?
Right. So we do not have numbers for firefighters. Okay. I can certainly go back and get the information for law enforcement officers. Okay. Now, this is self-reporting.
Right.
And so it's possible that it could be underreported. But we do know, and I had Senate do some research on this, that the leading cause of death for law enforcement officers is suicide, second only to COVID. So before COVID, it was suicide.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And certainly I can get that information for you for.
Okay, do we have other members that wish to be heard at this time? Do we have anyone from the audience that wishes to be heard on this particular bill? Okay, hearing none on that. This is just going to be a hearing today because we have another bill, I understand, that's coming into this subcommittee that we want to move on to the full committee. Is that right, Mr. Chairman? And that's what I'm talking about, yeah. So we will take up this bill and the other one, which is the restrictions bill, I believe, on the subcommittee on those. So we want to have, I'm going to try to get everything done as quickly as possible here to get it on out and get it to the full committee there. Any further questions from the committee or anyone else? If not, we stand adjourned. Thank you.
I will, yeah.
Your back still bothering you?